Hi, my name is Jason and I'm an application engineer here at 3M. Today we're going to talk to you about getting the right scratch profile in blend panels using finer grade abrasives. We're going to show you how to do that using 800 and 1000 grade abrasives, as well as using some other little tools like flexible abrasives with hard and soft pads to get rid of picture framing. We'll also touch on using a Festool blade to get rid of any defects in the panel before we start our sanding. Before we get started, I just want to cover a couple of things. First is you want to make sure you're always wearing the appropriate PPE. In this video, you'll see me wearing safety glasses, nitrile gloves, hearing protection, as well as a particulate respirator when I'm sanding. The second thing I want to say is that this video is intended for professional use, so for all you technicians out there in the body shops. If you want any more information, I put a link to safety and warranty info in the description below. So today we're talking about finer grade abrasives. Particularly, we're going to be looking at little tips and tricks for prepping panels and things we need to take note of when we're using different finer grade abrasives. We're going to be prepping this panel as if we were going to paint it, not where we would have to use sealer, but in a situation where we could go direct to base coat, or maybe a wet bed, or possibly be blending base coat across it. So the coarsest grade abrasive we'll be using is 800, and then we're also going to use some 1000. Anytime I dive into a prep panel, the first thing I want to look at is my edges to see if there's any picture framing, and that's where the paint is sort of stacked up next to a gap. We have a little bit on the edges of this panel, which will become more clear as I start to sand. The other thing I want to look for is any big imperfections, any dirt nibs, and in this panel I have a couple. With the finer grade base coat used today, the really finely ground metallics, we have to make sure all those are flattened out before we sand the panel. If we were to jump right in and sand with an interface pad, it may knock the texture down a little bit, but that bump will still be there. And if we were to spray a really fine metallic over the top, we'll see that in the end product. So I have a few little quick things I like to do to get rid of any of those. So first I kind of feel the panel and feel any spots. This panel's pretty good, but I do have one kind of bad one towards this top corner. So to knock that down first a little bit, I'm going to use a Festool blade. To use this, I'm going to set the string side down on the panel. I'm not going to put a lot of pressure, and I'm going to slowly guide this back and forth until I cut down that dirt nib until it's nice and smooth. Now I'm not feeling any more dragging with my Festool blade, so I can wipe that smooth, and now I have a much flatter surface to start my sanding without having to worry about that spot. Now that we have that tackled, we're going to take a look at our picture framing. The easiest way to show this to you on camera is to use a hard block and some finer grade abrasive, and I'm just going to lightly sand over the corner. We'll see how well this shows up on camera here, but I have a nice matte finish where I'm sanding, and then there's a shiny line right inside of that, and that's where the clear coat is actually lower than the edge. Anytime paint curls around the edge of a panel, it tends to build up on that side. So again, if this was going to be a black or a white, it's probably okay and we wouldn't have to worry about it. But with any fine metallic, we got to make sure we knock that down as much as possible before we spray our base color, or it'll be very noticeable after we clear coat. The way to get rid of that is, as I'm doing now, either with a hard block and some really fine abrasive, and with very light pressure, we're basically going to sand that edge until that shiny line goes away. And you can constantly just wipe away to check. If you're worried about burning through your edge, I know clear coat is thin on a lot of newer vehicles. You don't have to take it all the way out, but at least knock some of it out so as we do our final sand, it gets really close to perfect. And now this edge is looking really good. From there, we can move to, I have a more fine grade abrasive on a flexible pad. We always like to tackle our edges of a panel first, and then sand the face after. The reason we do that is anytime we're sanding by hand, we can leave inline scratches. And when we use our DA to follow up, we're actually going to get all of those out. If we were to sand with the DA first and then hit our edges, we could leave some straight line scratches that, again, those finely ground metallics could settle into, and we would see straight line scratches in our end result. So let's go ahead and get these edges sanded down. Okay, now that our edges are nice and scuffed, we can go ahead and do our final sanding. So now that we got our edges scuffed, I can go ahead and use a Festool system and get this all cleaned up. To do that, I'm going to use a cleaning disc on this unit, and that'll help suck up all the dust so I can verify my edges are sanded enough. One little tip I have for you, in a lot of shops I see people using gray or white Scotch-Brite pads to scuff their edges. Just know that the harder you push with this, the coarser the abrasive is going to act on the surface. So make sure when you're using these, especially on blend panels, that you're using very light pressure, just enough to sort of get the job done and see that it's scuffing properly. Don't push too hard or you could burn through or leave too aggressive of a scratch. Let's get this panel cleaned up. This is a big reason why I always recommend cleaning with something like our Festool system before we move on to the next step, because I can see I just have a little bit more scuffing to do in this corner. So I'm going to get this scuffed, and then I'm going to switch over to my abrasive and then sand the panel. So depending on what paint line you're using in your shop, as we prep the rest of this panel, you may use a different grade abrasive than we're using in this video. Typically, most paint lines are going to call for either 800 or 1000 grit abrasive for a blend panel. In this video, we're going to use both so you can see the difference between them and also see what fits your shop. A big mistake we see with finer grade abrasives is that a technician will use a piece of sandpaper for too long. They're trying to get the most out of that paper. They think they can stretch it a little bit further. But what happens is this starts to load. It'll actually start to leave little pigtails in the finish. Again, if we were spraying a solid color like a white, a black, or maybe even a red, that may be okay and it may be hidden. But with any metallic color, those pigtails could show up as you start to clear coat, causing you to repaint the panel. So make sure you switch out your sandpaper regularly. If you start to see a pigtail, the best thing you can do is swap that piece of paper out for another one. Commonly what I see in the shop is if they start to get a few pigtails, the technician will take the sandpaper and rub it on their leg to clean the paper and then get a little bit more out of it. That may be okay on the body side, but I still wouldn't recommend it. I definitely would advise against it when we're prepping panels because you don't know what contaminants could be on the clothes that you're wearing. And when you then take that paper and put it to the panel, we could be embedding contaminants into the surface. So make sure you're always using a clean, fresh disc and always change paper when it starts to pigtail. Let's get this thing sanded. After sanding a while with 800 grit, we're starting to get the panel flattened out like we wanted to. We wanted to stop and show you, this is an example of that pigtailing. So this is when we can start to see I've either used my sandpaper a little bit too long, or I have some little piece of debris or contaminant that I picked up from an unclean panel that's now lodged in the sandpaper. This is when I know it's time to switch to a fresh new piece to make sure I don't end up with any of these marks after I'm done spraying base coat. So I'm going to get this panel cleaned up and go over that area again with a fresh piece of sandpaper. So again, remember to change your paper as soon as you start to see those little pigtails. And again, what those come from is loading of the sandpaper, usually from some type of contaminant. that was in the old paint, whether it's road grime from the years of it driving out there, or it could be something as simple as a dirt nib that was embedded in the clear coat. As you can see on this sandpaper, this is what loading looks like on the face of it as it starts to build up. That's when we know that it's time to switch to a new piece. So we have our panel all sanded and ready to go if we were going to paint this. I just want to make note, I did a few different things along the edge to address that picture framing. Up here you can see a really good example of that. You can see that shiny line inside of the edge. And on this side up here you can see how that's nice and flat. Ideally, this is what we want to go for on a blend panel, but again, we have to be careful. If it's a factory panel that's never been painted and our picture framing is this high, we don't want to fully sand that out because we could end up burning through the clear coat and ruining that blend panel and now have to go into the next panel as well. So be careful around those edges and try to get them as flat as possible. But we have our fully prepped panel and we're ready to go. Thank you for watching this video. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want more content like this, be sure to check us out online at 3M Collision Repair Academy.